The hydraulic pressure along both sides of the hull decreases as the nearer the hull is to the surface flow, the faster the rate accelerates, and the water level around the ship drops considerably. For this reason, sinkage at the bow and stern and subsequent trim change become larger in shallow water than in deep water. We should be careful that sinkage at the bow and change of trim become greater when a ship runs in shallow water. Now we shall see how the depth of water affects a ship's turning capability in shallow water. Let's take a look at the data of the turning capabilities of large ships. Every curve indicates the tactical diameter of a specific ship by the multiples of the ship's length. This is a ship turning at 7 knots with a 35-degree rudder angle in deep water where the ratio of water depth to draft is 6.0. This is a ship turning in shallow water where the ratio of water depth to draft is changed to 1.5 while the other conditions remained unchanged. This is when the ratio of water depth to draft is changed to 1.2 without changing any other conditions. Now we shall see how the turning track differs as the depth of water changes. When the ratio of water depth to draft is 6.0, the turning tracks are as seen here. This is a conventional turn. Here is an accelerating turn. This is a coasting turn. When the ratio of water depth to draft is 1.5, the turning tracks are as seen here. This is a conventional turn, here is an accelerating turn, and this is a coasting turn. When the ratio of water depth to draft is 1.2, the turning tracks are as seen here. This is a conventional turn, here is an accelerating turn, and this is a coasting turn. Thus, we can estimate the tactical diameter of a ship running in restricted water as the multiples of its length. Although the presented data hitherto are taken from the test results of large ships, this method can also be applied to smaller ships. In view of the maneuverability of a ship, the depth of water also affects course stability, like the effects on turning ability. We shall study the difference of the effects on course stability in deep water and in shallow water from the results of zigzag maneuver tests. In the zigzag maneuver test, a ship's rudder starts to swing alternately to port and starboard when the ship is set on a steady straight course. At first, the rudder is put to starboard 10 degrees until her head swings starboard 10 degrees from her original course. Immediately after the ship's head swings 10 degrees starboard, the rudder is changed to port 10 degrees until her head points 10 degrees port from her original course. These alternate rudder operations are repeated several times, making a ship run in a zigzag course. These overshooting angles are called overshoot angles. Here you see the results of Z tests conducted in deep and shallow water. As you see, the required time to turn a ship's head port or starboard to a settled angle in shallow water becomes shorter with a smaller overshoot angle than that in deep water. This means that we can expect quicker rudder effect in shallow water compared to that in deep water. A well-remembered case among several cases reported in the past is that of a large passenger ship navigating in shallow water without reducing her speed that hit her bottom severely on the rocks. When running in restricted water, it's essential to keep enough under-keel clearance to avoid the deterioration of maneuverability and touch-bottom damage. Under-keel clearance means the space between the ship's bottom and the seabed. It equals the value when the ship's draft is subtracted from the sum of chart datum and height of tide at that time. To maintain enough under-keel clearance, we have to consider the factors affecting the sinkage of the hull, such as squat allowance, wave response allowance, possible error of chart datum, meteorological and oceanographic conditions, and other environmental conditions, and secure a safety allowance that eliminates ship handling difficulties. As we have studied in this video, the effects of sinkage and change of trim when a ship navigates in shallow water greatly affect the ship's maneuverability. Enough knowledge of these effects in restricted waters will prevent accidents.
In January 1934, the British battleship Nelson left Portsmouth for the open sea at 9 knots and went aground on a starboard shoal in a narrow channel due to the unexpected ship's response of swinging her head to starboard, despite the helm being turned to port 15 degrees for the intended course. The reason for this grounding was a typical bank effect. In restricted waters, where the navigable width of a passage is limited, ships are obliged to navigate close to a bare shore or artificial structures such as banks and bridge piers. In such a passage, ships also have to pass by or run in the same direction, while keeping minimum sea room from each other. Under such circumstances, a ship's motion may be largely affected by interference between two ships passing by and going in the same direction in close proximity, and bank effects due to banks, bridge piers and sea-bottom contours. In view of ship handling, ships are exposed to higher risks under such circumstances. Such phenomena affect any ship, regardless of size, when it enters restricted waters. We shall see how a bank effect acts on a ship's steerability. Even in a narrow passage, such as a canal, ships manage to maintain a straight course as they advance on the centre line of passage. By contrast, when a ship's track deviates to either side off the centre line of a passage, the ship moves with its hull as a whole being pulled closer to the bank, while its bow is repelled from the bank. On the contrary, water level rises up the bow because displaced water mass is accumulated in the confined space between the closer bank and the ship's hull. This water level makes a repulsive force to turn the ship's bow outward. This means the generation of a bow outward moment. The bank effect is a phenomenon that causes a bow outward moment and attracts the ship's hull as a whole to the bank due to decreased pressure at the midship area. This attracting force is called suction. Ship handling becomes very tricky due to the deterioration of course stability caused by the bank effect when a ship navigates a narrow channel, as we've illustrated. How should we handle a ship under such conditions? To have a ship run in a straight line on its intended course by offsetting suction and bow outward moment caused by the bank effect, the ship's head has to be kept obliquely to its intended course. As a result of this oblique posture to the advancing direction, extra force and turning moment will be generated on the hull. This extra force will offset suction to the bank. However, to offset bow outward moment, a checking rudder motion toward the bank is still required. This means that the turning moment and the force produced by the proper angle of checking rudder can offset the forces and turning moments generated by bank effect and oblique posture. To prevent contact with the bank at the stern, it is necessary for a ship to steer toward the bank. The ship can then maintain a parallel track to the bank. When there are multiple ships passing by, running abreast or overtaking in a narrow channel, the interaction between two ships moving in close proximity will sometimes have a grave effect on those ships. The effect of the interaction varies depending on the relative positions of the two ships. First, we look at the case of two ships of almost the same size passing each other. When the bows of the two ships come closer within the mutual hydrodynamic range, a strong repulsive force at the midships and bow outward moment are created. Alternatively, strong suction at the midships and bow inward moment are produced between two ships when they come abeam of each other. When the sterns of the two ships pass each other, these effects are transformed into repulsive force and bow outward moment. These effects of extra force and moment fade away quickly as the distance between the two ships increases. The results comparing the effects of interaction at 4 knots with those at 6 knots demonstrate that the interaction between two ships passing becomes larger and persists proportionally to ship speed. When two ships pass by in the opposite direction, a collision seldom happens because the influences of repulsion and suction last for a comparatively short time. However, it should be borne in mind that the risk of contact at the stern will increase if either of them should turn its rudder in the wrong direction inadvertently. The interaction between two ships of almost the same size running abreast in the same direction or overtaking in a narrow channel also varies depending on their relative positions. In this case, the risks of rear-end collision and contact increase because the interaction between the two ships lasts for longer. Let's see how an interaction is produced when ship A overtakes the other ship, B, when the intervening beam distance almost equals ship's breadth. The effects will be like these when the bow of ship A overtakes the stern of ship B. When ship A advances a third to a quarter of its length from the stern of ship B in parallel,